Is this America's worst serial killer? Heading for the beaches, swimmers beware, and looking for a break in the hostage logjam. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. Hopes are rising again for a quick release of Western hostages in Beirut. But police sources in Lebanon now say that one of the captives is dead. They say that Alberto Molinari, an Italian businessman, was killed shortly after he was kidnapped in 1985. Former hostage Edward Tracy returned home to the United States today, his first trip to the USA in 25 years. Tracy's going into a veterans hospital in Boston that specializes in post-traumatic stress. The fate of the remaining hostages in Lebanon now hinges on complex negotiations following an apparent further softening of Israel's position. Bob Simon in Israel has the latest on that. Bob, good evening.
Good evening, Dan. Israeli negotiators gave a letter to the Secretary General today offering to open all Israeli jails with Lebanese prisoners to the Red Cross, provided that the Red Cross be given access to Israeli prisoners of war. The letter, handed to Perez de Cuellar by chief Israeli negotiator Uri Lugrani, did not contain any concrete proposals, Israeli sources say. These can be discussed when and only when Israel receives concrete information regarding its prisoners.
Israel has 7 prisoners of war unaccounted for, and we have made it abundantly clear that we are expecting a sign of life from these prisoners so that we can go and use them.
I think that the Israelis want assurances, which I will try to obtain from the other side, in order for the Israelis to make an important gesture vis-à-vis the Westerners, vis-à-vis the Arabs.
It seems clear that the United Nations is serving as a mailbox for messages between Israel and Tehran. The Israelis are convinced the Iranians hold all the keys. The family of the prisoner Hezbollah wants most, Sheikh Obeid, issued another appeal for his release in South Lebanon today. Israel scoffed at a report in the Tehran Times that he'll be freed this weekend. They said radical Palestinian leader Ahmed Jabril's claim that 3 Israeli prisoners are alive is unverified and unverifiable. They dismiss reports like this as disinformation, inspired by a desire to free Sheikh Obeid, a desire that more than anything else, they say, moved Hezbollah to release McCarthy and Tracy.
Israel is not going to give up the major trump card, the major point of leverage that we have over these hostage takers by giving it to them in advance of receiving information or in advance of receiving our men. If our men come back home, I think Sheikh Obeid could find his way back to South Lebanon.
The sense of urgency in Geneva, the air of secrecy, the strategic leaks to the press, all conspire to give the impression that a release of all the Western hostages is just days off. But officials close to the negotiations caution that the reality is far more complicated, that even if the first moves have been made, the endgame is still a long ways away. Dan?
Bob, Israel is giving ground again. Now what's the complicating factor?
The most complicated step might be the first step. Even if Iran is courting the West, even if Hezbollah wants to release its Western hostages, the road leads through Jerusalem. They have to give the Israelis what they want. And sources here sense that there's a fierce debate going on within Tehran and within Hezbollah over whether or not they can swallow this.
Thanks. Across the country tonight, police are investigating what could be the biggest serial murder case yet. From a jail in Gulfport, Mississippi, a man is confessing to dozens of murders in at least 17 states. CBS News correspondent Doug Tennell is in Mississippi.
Investigators today resumed the interrogation of a man who, if his claims prove true, would be the most infamous serial killer in American history. Donald Leroy Evans, 34 years old, says he murdered as many as 70 persons in 17 states during what he called a 10-year rampage across America.
You know, there's no rhyme or reason. There has not been any prostitutes. There hadn't been only women. There hadn't been just strangulations. The only thing that would make him is that he preferred to stay out of high population areas.
Evans has told the FBI he will cooperate with investigators on one condition, that he be sentenced to death for his crimes.
He said, I have lived by the sword, and I want to die by the sword administered to me by a state executioner.
So far, investigators are certain they can tie Evans to 2 murders in Florida in the mid-'80s and one that finally led to Evans' arrest last week, the murder of a 10-year-old girl named Beatrice Ruth. Here at Jones Park in Gulfport, Evans met his last victim, the little